here. Welcome back to the Fashion Bunker. Ah, what a lovely day. What a lovely day. Okay, so first, for those of you who don't know yet, I have a YouTube channel. Hi, now you know. But I also have Patreon, a Super Dacob all spelled together. So if you wish to support the channel, help see it grow, you could pledge as little as $1, but you could go up to $5. You could pledge several times $5. Anyway, you can unlock this way videos that are only available on Patreon, as well as photos only available on Patreon. And the community there is also incredible. It's a safe platform, you know, because we don't, there's no trolls. That's another beautiful thing. And people are just so wonderful. So what I want to do today, first of all, I would like to show you how amazing the Fashion Bunker community is on both sides, of course, YouTube and Patreon. But I have asked permission from one of my patrons to read their comment here on YouTube, and this patron has granted permission, so thank you so much. I will just state the first initial letter of this person's name because I don't want to, you know, because this person's full name is on the other side, and I wish to respect this person's privacy. But you know who you are, so thank you so much. So I'm just going to say Kay. Kay wrote a very long comment, but I will synthesize it. I will literally read from the part that's relevant to us in terms of the topic of the day, which is kind of a memory of perfumes and how they're triggered. And actually, Kay writes it best. Let's just read the comment and get straight to the topic, which triggered so many thoughts inside of me, and I hope it's going to inspire you too, guys. So here we go. Kay writes, now, to abbreviate the text, we were talking over on Patreon about Agent Provocateur's fragrance and also the brand Agent Provocateur, but in particular the fragrance and the version of the Agent Provocateur fragrance available today on the market. So Kay used to use Agent Provocateur when it first came out, and now Kay has also tried out the Agent Provocateur version available in stores today. At first sniff, everything seemed great, exactly like my older bottle. But as it developed, it seemed sharper, thinner, and worst of all, lacking in that amazingly filthy, sexy, animalic dry down that it used to have. I honestly don't think this fragrance was ever popular enough to warrant becoming a fake. I can't see anyone wanting to make a knockoff, which makes me think that it has either been reformulated or is a bad batch. This leads me to my point. Here we go. When a favorite fragrance seems different, how much of that is the fragrance and how much is just our own perception? If we know or simply assume that it has been reformulated, how much does that influence the way it smells to us? If we were presented with 2 or more versions or years of a particular scent in unmarked bottles, not knowing which was which, how often would we know or even prefer the original? In perfume, what is reality and what is memory? These are the kinds of questions only the fragrance-obsessed probably think about. But since I know you are one of those people, I'd be interested to hear your take on this. Well, thank you so much, Kay. I love this question. In fact, it warrants a whole video. So not only are you helping out the channel, Kay, by being a patron on Patreon, but you're also contributing culturally, because this is such an important topic. You know, where to begin with? Having a notion of a memory, of a fragrance, is already something so ethereal. You know, you can hardly fathom understanding what's a memory of a fragrance? How can we remember how something smells like? And yet we do. It's so abstract. I mean, if you see a painting, one of the most famous paintings in the world, because of brand marketing, really, not because it's the best painting ever painted, but whatever, let's digress there. The Mona Lisa. I say Mona Lisa, and all of y'all's, probably most of y'all's, have exactly the vision of the Mona Lisa in your minds right now. If I say Poison by Christian Dior, for those of you who have smelled it, you have exactly right now the memory of how Poison by Christian Dior smells like. First edition Poison. Hypnotic Poison, first edition. Second edition. Dior Addict. Chanel No. 5. You know, all these smells, these memories of smells just pop into your minds and you remember how they smell. Dolce & Gabbana, first edition, Pour Homme. But how, if I were to ask you to, from memory, paint or draw the Mona Lisa, well, none of us is Leonardo da Vinci. None of us is going to be able to really kind of, we know exactly in our minds how she looks like, how that smile looks like, how the eye looks like the shaved eye, kind of shaved. There's no eyebrow there really. That shadow underneath the eyebrow bone. The yellow hues of the painting. And yet, if we were to kind of translate that memory through our hands, through our extensions of the body, and try to kind of, with our hands, portray what the mind sees, somewhere in that connection between the brain and the memory and the extremities of our body, which are these fingers and arms, something will get lost in translation from here, traveling all the way there, out through here, through a utensil, a paintbrush or a pencil. Somewhere from here all the way to there, we will lose information. Something is going to get lost in translation, just like in the analog days when people would make a copy of a VHS tape. It's an analog copy. So every time you, or let's make it even simpler, not too technical. If you go to a photocopy store and you kind of make a photocopy, then you take that photocopy, you put it into a machine and you copy that again. It comes out slightly less focused. It becomes more grainy, the image. Let's say it's a photo of a flower. You photocopy the photo of the flower. It comes out a little bit less focused. Then you take that copy and you photocopy it again. It comes out even more fuzzy. And you keep doing it, and from generation to generation, and we call that from generation to generation, with every photocopy of the next copy that you made, you will lose a bit of information. And same happens with VHS tapes, copying them from copy to copy. But in a very exponential way, our memory of an image loses so much information as it kind of flows through us and exits through our extremities onto a piece of paper if we draw it or what have you. But how can we translate all of this into perfumes? I cannot concoct I'm not a perfumer. You know what I mean? I can always take a pencil and try to outline the Mona Lisa or her essence or the mood of the Mona Lisa painting. And then you could kind of, through my shabby drawing, you could kind of figure out, oh wait, you're trying to draw the Mona Lisa, right? But you cannot, even in a bad way, render a memory of a fragrance unless you're not a perfumer yourself. Nobody needs to be a painter, you know what I mean, or an artist, but you could always draw. You could always take a pencil and draw it simple. It's one utensil and it's done. But to create a perfume, you need more than one utensil. You need a lot of different ingredients. A lot of things come into play to create a fragrance. I know that also a lot of hours are spent painting the Mona Lisa, and a lot of different colors are used. But essentially, it's a bidimensional image, flat on a surface, and it's been painted, and that's what it is. And it represents an image that we kind of remember. Our retina in our eyes kind of absorbs it and we remember it. But with a fragrance, I have the smell exactly in my mind of Christian Dior's Poison or what have you, but how do I know? Let's say I smelled Christian Dior's Poison 20 years ago, and Dior is still producing Poison today, and I smell the batch produced this year. How do I know that the batch that was produced this year smells different or the same or similar to the batch I smelled 20 years ago. Now, mind you, this is in case I only have a memory of what I smelled 20 years ago. I don't have that fragrance from 20 years ago today. I only have the memory of it. Because even if I had a residue of that, and I do have a residue of 20 or even older, 25, whatever year old poison bottle today, the liquid has altered, has changed through time. It has become more intense. It has intensified. It has become more dry in a way, you know what I mean? More concentrated. So the bottle of poison that is 25 years old, it ain't going to smell the same like it smelled 20 years ago. So that's what I'm saying. Don't make the mistake of thinking, oh, but I have a vintage bottle. I can compare the vintage bottle smell to the new batch smell. We're not doing that. We're doing just from memory, the memory of the fragrance we know without sniffing an old bottle, just the memory, and the new bottle today. I think, and this is just a theory, I think that it would be impossible for us to ever, especially 20 years later, because we change, we grow. I don't think it would be possible to ever smell 20 years later, the new batch, and say that it smells like what it used to smell through our memory 20 years ago. Because again, a lot of stuff gets lost in translation from this passage to that passage back to 20 years ago. A lot gets lost in that sort of thought process and translation. And it's a very complex thought process, so we can't even really dissect it in a video like this, but you understand where I'm heading here. It's so fascinating. It should be a science on its own. But let's get more in depth with it. The reason why I think, well, many reasons why I think the batch today, produced today, will always smell different than the memory we have of the batch produced many years ago. One, if the perfume has any sort of natural ingredients in it that are not chemical, that cannot be produced one-to-one equally every season for every batch, flowers are different. The harvest is different. The quality of the bloom is different, of the fruits is different from year to year, from harvest to harvest, because of climate influences. Too many rain, too many bugs attacked it. They sprayed a new poison to kill the bugs. A lot of things influence natural raw ingredients. So of course, from batch to batch, a perfume that has many natural ingredients is going to smell slightly different. But that's also the magic of it. But even if we put aside that fact, let's just focus on ourselves, us, human beings, the biggest ego parasites that have ever existed. It's all about us, us, us. Okay, fine. Let's focus on us. We grow. We evolve. From day to day, we are different. I was talking to Vivienne Westwood in an upcoming project some of you already know, Art Lovers Unite, this movie that we're trying to get, finalized finally as soon as possible. One thing I can tell you is, and this is something that is not a scoop for the movie, because Vivienne has mentioned this in many interviews, that she would send her art students to a particular museum and ask them if, the museum were to burn, if they could save only one painting, which painting would it be? And that was their homework. And then the next day they had to come back to the academy and tell her which one of the paintings they would save and why they chose that painting. And then they would do that. And then she would say, okay, well, keep going to that gallery and let me know in a month's time or in 2 months' time, would you still want to save that same painting? Nobody really wanted to save the same painting after a certain amount of time has passed. And considering, that they're going to visit a permanent exhibition of pieces that are always there. We're not talking about fluctuations, so every 3 to 4 months a new exhibition comes into the museum. So of course you have new paintings there. No, we're saying, let's consider for a moment that you have 20 paintings in the museum and it's always these 20 paintings. They never change. And so the first time you go into the museum, you could only save one. If the museum burned down, which one would it be? After a month's time, or after some time has passed and you keep going to the museum, you're going to realize all of a sudden, oh, wait a minute, but I actually prefer saving that other painting. Because now all of a sudden that other painting speaks to me much more than the first one I chose a month earlier. How come? The painting you chose now has been here also a month earlier. What has changed? The painting is still the same. Maybe the light is slightly different because maybe this gallery has some sort of slightly filtering natural lights. Your mood has changed. Maybe you're in a better mood today than you were a month ago. And yet you haven't really noticed this painting a month ago, but now you want to save this one. You have grown. You have evolved. And this is what I like very much about what Vivienne Westwood says. She says, you're a freedom fighter if you're an art lover. By that, she doesn't mean some elitist, oh, you gotta, be knowledgeable about art. You gotta know art history. You don't. Art is what moves you, what makes you think. And if you dedicate time to what moves you, what makes you think, you will grow. You will stimulate yourself. And it will become a growth, a natural growth. You automatically start growing. And why does she say you're a freedom fighter when you do that? Because the more you're knowledgeable about these things and the more sensitive you become, the more you become aware of your surroundings and the people around you and the needs of others around you, you become more altruistic. You start acknowledging the fact that you are not alone in this world. There are other people there as well, and not everything is about you. This is what memory of a fragrance is to me. It's growth. It's acknowledging the fact that we have to learn to let go. This is the most difficult thing, of our egos in order to understand the concept of change within. Because we usually think we're always the same, but we're not. But when you acknowledge the fact that you keep shifting, changing stuff, and embrace that change, when you manage to embrace the change, you will have achieved that kind of tiny step towards letting go of the ego. You never really let go of the ego completely. You can't. As long as you live in society under the norms, social norms of today, you got to have an ego. Otherwise, the rest of society is just going to poop all over you and you're done for. Unfortunately, that's the world we live in today. But we can change that. And we can change that by changing ourselves. By acknowledging the fact that we do change with each day. And the more we dedicate ourselves to art, to this type of culture, to educating ourselves about the nuances of everyday life, and the quicker we will acknowledge the fact that we are changing, and we're going to change for the better. And if we all do that, the world will become a better place, and there still is hope for us as humanity or mankind. So this is all connected to the perfumes. And you know me, I always say everything is holistic. This is all connected. Everything is always connected. But in particular, it's connected to this question about the memory of a fragrance. How much of a fragrance has really changed as opposed to our perception or memory or desire for the type of smell of that fragrance changing through time. I personally think it's a little bit of everything. We change. That's the biggest factor that makes us smell something in a different way. Granted, that fragrance is still produced by the same company. I'm not talking about Dolce & Gabbana being produced by Euroitalia, then being produced by Procter & Gamble, then passing through Coty, but then deleting the contract with them and ending up with Shiseido Prestige. Those are different companies, and sometimes some companies own the rights to a formula of a fragrance. So if the fragrance ends up in the hands of another company, they have to slightly alter the formula because it will cost too much to pay the rights to the other company to get the formula one-to-one as it was. This is not always the case. Sometimes it is the case, though. And also sometimes fragrances are so old, companies just wish to water down the ingredients and use cheaper ingredients because they don't want to keep, producing the highest standard and quality of the fragrance like it was 50, 60 years ago, That also can happen. But we're talking about now, Poison, Christian Dior. Christian Dior is still very proud of their Poison. They've limited Poison to only an eau de toilette and a pure extract, limited edition, sometimes available on their website. But also Chanel No. 5, the pure perfume, or the eau de toilette. Yes, there are things that change because new laws happen. Certain ingredients that have been legal way back are not legal anymore today, so you have to kind of find an artificial substitute. But still, nevertheless, I think the biggest change is in us, not in the perfumes. As far as Agent Provocateur is concerned, when I have the memory of the first edition of the fragrance, but I was much younger then, much, much younger. I was a kid. And now, smelling it with this new bottle, I remember to me, it smells like Agent Provocateur. And since I was much younger and more superficial, because I didn't have the depth that I have today, and today I'm shallow compared, hopefully, to what I'm going to be tomorrow. But what I was in the past was more shallow than what I am. I'm hoping. Maybe it's just my ego talking. You see, you'll never know. We'll never know. I'll never know. But if it is the case that I was more shallow back then of course I didn't have the depth to understand certain crevices of that perfume back then that maybe now I smell out, even in a formulation of today that might be cheaper than it used to be back then. But nevertheless, I recognized it immediately and I smelled, oh yes, this is Agent Provocateur. It doesn't have that ambery, resinousy, rich feel like it used to have in my memory many years ago, but it's still there. The perfume is still there. The DNA is still there. Is that enough to still love it? In my personal opinion, it is if the fragrance is cheaper. And Agent Provocateur is way cheaper today. You could get it really for like the fraction of the price that it used to cost. So in that case, I'm still being given, that freedom to experience Agent Provocateur. And I love that fragrance very much, even though it doesn't smell as expensive as it used to. Again, from my memory, the fact that the bottle is much cheaper now, the fact that the perfume costs way less now also contributes to me not trusting it. As shallow as this sounds, the second that we are confronted with a Kelly bag that's like 10 grand, we kind of immediately think, oh, we have to respect it, because it's so expensive and because not everybody can buy it because Hermes doesn't have enough. Hermes is artificially, hyping the fact that is artificially limiting quantities. So it's all brand marketing, brainwashing. But, and also, you think, oh, 10 grand for Kelly. Yeah, but also think the fact that bag is glazed, has glazing all over the edges. That's the cheapest it gets, guys. I mean, I know that, it was made like this since forever, but they could update it and kind of bend the leather in and then sew it together rather than keeping it open and just glazing the top. No, that doesn't warrant that price, never, ever. But because the price is so high, we think, wow, incredible. If Agent Provocateur's batch code produced this year, instead of costing, I don't know, $15 to $30, 100 ml bottle, if it would cost $300, I think most of us would all of a sudden start saying how incredible noble it smells. Oh, I'm sure of it. We fall victim to these sort of tricks that the mind plays on us. And the mind is very manipulable, very, very manipulable. The bigger our egos are, and the more manipulable the mind is. Just be wary of that. That's a very deep concept there. The bigger and the more inflated the ego is, and the more manipulable the mind is. The more inflated the ego is directly proportional to the more manipulable the mind. That's an equation right there if I've ever seen one myself. So, in conclusion, these are the kinds of questions only the fragrance obsessed probably think about. Yes, I totally agree with you, Kay, my dear. But as you can see, we can expand this conversation to way, way, way broader limits than just fragrance, because this opens up a spectrum of conversation that can really be endless. You just need to find somebody to converse with that has similar interests and that is ready to discover new nuances within existence every day together with you. So I know that this is not a topic that most YouTubers make because most of them either do drama channels or are going to show you how they, I don't know, break a watermelon with their head, or they're going to show off to you that they're boarding first class airplane and they're dressed, so they say on their Twitter accounts, like they look like crap, and then they get scanned by the stewardesses or stewards, and then they say like, where's my seat? I'm in first class. And then the steward and stewardesses are going to be like, oh, really? You're in first class. Oh, my bad for misjudging how you look. Like that sort of showing off is what YouTube is all about. Not here. And I know we're very niche, but stick with me. We are growing, and the bigger the community gets, and the more hope we have for the future of humanity. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you liked this video. If you have, please do thumb it up and leave me comments in the comment section down below. And don't forget Patreon, because a lot of these incredible conversations also happen there. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel here on YouTube. I'm also on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Don't you ever forget. Don't ever give up on love. Love you guys. See you soon. Take care. Bye. Mwah.